President Volodymyr Zelensky, after intense pressure from Washington regarding Donald Trump's peace plan, stated that Ukraine is facing its toughest choice yet: either accept the United States' proposed peace plan or risk losing a key partner. And here, Zelensky emphasized that the situation requires maximum honesty and calmness from society. According to him, Ukraine is currently under unprecedented pressure, and the country may face a dilemma: either lose its dignity or risk weakening Allied support. Well, unfortunately, that's true, because Reuters reports that the United States has indeed threatened to stop supplying weapons, intelligence sharing, and so on in order to push Kyiv toward a peace plan. At the same time, United States Vice President J.D. Vance publicly stated that, in his opinion, no amount of military or financial aid to Kyiv would supposedly help anymore. That's why it's time to capitulate. And the main problem is that Trump believed Vladimir Putin, even today. Trump stated that Ukraine will soon lose all of the Donbas territory anyway, so supposedly it's easier to just give it up and for all of Ukraine to surrender altogether. Trump also called on the Baltic countries. And now it is already known that Zelensky has sent a delegation to Switzerland for negotiations with the Americans and the Russians. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a detailed comment under this episode. Also subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. In addition, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. So, Ukraine is faced with a very difficult choice: either accept the peace plan proposed by the United States or face the risk of losing a key partner. President Volodymyr Zelensky said this in a video address released for the Day of Dignity and Freedom. Zelensky stressed the need for society's utmost honesty and calm. He says Ukraine is facing unprecedented pressure. Here's a quote. Zelensky stressed that Ukraine is expected to respond. However, the president himself believes that he already gave this answer on May 20, 2019 at the moment of taking the oath, when he swore to protect the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine. Zelensky says Ukraine will keep working calmly and constructively with the United States and other partners to reach needed decisions. Quote, "I will present arguments, I will persuade, I will offer alternatives. We won't give the enemy any reason to claim Ukraine doesn't want peace, or is disrupting the process, or that Ukraine isn't ready for diplomacy. That will not happen." Then the president stated that Kyiv will act as quickly as possible. Quote, "Today, on Saturday and Sunday, and all of next week, and only as much and as long as necessary, so that among all proposals, the dignity and freedom of Ukrainians, foundations of Ukraine's independence and future, are preserved." And here I should remind you that the plan proposed by the United States, prepared by the special envoy of the United States President Steve Witkoff and the special representative of the Russian President Kirill Dmitriev, includes transferring Crimea and Donbas under Moscow's control. This covers Donetsk region areas outside Russian control, reducing Ukraine's armed forces, rejecting NATO membership, banning foreign peacekeepers, and confirming Ukraine's non-nuclear status. Russia is being offered a phased lifting of sanctions, reinstatement to the G8, and complete amnesty for all military crimes. Well, and as sources from Axios reported, these proposals shocked Kyiv and European capitals. And so, the Guardian correspondent Layuk Karding pointed out that the English version of the plan contains very awkward constructions, which may indicate that the document was originally drafted in Russian. And not only that, in fact, after reading the English version of the document, I also definitely noticed some inconsistencies there. I'll talk about this in a separate episode. In addition, a Reuters source claims that Washington threatened Kyiv to stop supplying weapons and intelligence if the peace plan is not signed by November 28. Missed Trump's deadlines? Well, here they are again. At the same time, according to a statement from the German government, European leaders, in a phone conversation with Zelensky, rejected a key provision of the draft and agreed that the Ukrainian army must retain the ability to defend the country's sovereignty, and that the current line of contact should be the starting point for any peace negotiations. And this is where things get most interesting and, unfortunately, most dangerous. Donald Trump unfortunately fell for all of Putin's manipulations. The day before, Donald Trump stated that if Volodymyr Zelensky does not accept the peace plan, he will have to keep fighting, and this threatens failure. Quote, if Zelensky doesn't like this agreement, they should just keep fighting. Eventually, he'll have to accept something. Remember when I told you in the Oval Office, you don't have any cards, not long ago? Don't forget, I inherited this war. This war would have never happened. I inherited this war. And I thought that Zelensky should have made a deal a year ago, 2 years ago. The best option would have been if it never started at all. That would have been a good deal. That could have been done too if you had the right president, but you didn't have the right president. And that's where a big problem comes in. Trump insists that Ukraine should accept that it has lost Donbass and that it's better to simply give up the remaining unoccupied territory voluntarily. After all, according to Trump, Russia will take over all these lands anyway. And the danger is that this is exactly what the Russians were aiming for with their assaults on Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. To show Trump the picture that they can actually capture everything very quickly. But don't forget that the Russians had been building up their forces for this push for several months, and you can't say that they are capable of fighting at this pace forever. But Putin put exactly this message into Trump's head, and unfortunately, Trump truly believes it. He says, listen, they're pushing forward so hard over there that it would be better for Ukraine to just surrender, because it will only get harder from here. After all that, today Putin made a statement, quote, Ukraine and its European allies' stance stems from a lack of objective information about the actual battlefield situation. I assume Dmitriev again told Vitkov about the real battlefield situation with Russians already controlling half of Ukraine. I'll continue the quote, neither Ukraine nor Europe realizes the possible consequences. Kupiansk is the latest example. On November 4th, it was publicly stated in Kyiv that there were no more than 60 Russian servicemen in this city. And within the next few days, this city will be completely unblocked by Ukrainian forces. But I want to inform you that even at that time, the city of Kupiansk was almost entirely in the hands of the Russian armed forces. The city's fate was already fully decided then. If Kyiv does not want to discuss President Trump's proposal and refuses to do so, then both they and the European warmongers must understand that the events that happened in Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated in other key areas of the front. Maybe not as quickly as we would like, but inevitably this will be repeated. Overall, this suits us because it helps achieve the special military operations goal by military means. And why did I give you this long quote from Putin? This is nearly identical to what Donald Trump says, and he unfortunately believes it. And Trump also fell for another trick, the Kremlin's deliberate strikes on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. Trump noted that the coming winter could be cold, and that Ukraine's energy sector has already suffered numerous massive attacks. So it's better to surrender than to be attacked, and that's just unthinkable. That these strikes on civilian infrastructure, homes, hospitals, and similar targets, these are acts of international terrorism. And Trump says, listen, to stop terrorism, you don't need to eliminate the terrorists, you need to make the victims stop resisting. As a result, Reuters writes that the United States threatened Ukraine to stop supplying weapons and sharing intelligence, seeking Kyiv's agreement on a framework plan for settlement. Sources speaking on condition of anonymity said that Kyiv is under more pressure from Washington than during any previous peace talks. According to them, the United States wants Ukraine to sign a framework agreement by next Thursday. But what's even more striking is that a source from the White House claims that this plan was drawn up immediately after a discussion with one of the top officials of President Zelensky's administration, Rustem Umerov, who agreed with most of it after making a few changes and presented it to President Zelensky. And let me remind you that Umerov was in Miami on November 16 and met with Steve Vitkov. Umerov himself is now denying all this information. But it is he and the head of the president's office, Andriy Yermak, who are now leading the delegation that went to Switzerland for negotiations with the Americans and the Russians. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye. More to come.